There was a spark, a loud pop, and then the most glorious shriek I'd ever heard. Over the fence, Karen, my entitled neighbor, screamed like her Gucci sneakers just caught fire. Technically, it was her son's ATV charger that caught fire, and technically, she had it coming. You don't steal power from an electrical engineer and expect to get away with it, not after I warned her, not after the HOA ignored me, and definitely not after she told me, laughing, "It's just a little juice. Lighten up." Oh, I lightened up all right. I lightened up her entire backyard with enough voltage to turn her off-brand ATV into a toaster. But let me rewind. You need to know how we got to this perfect explosive moment of karmic justice. It didn't start with sparks. It started with a subtle blip on my home energy monitor. See, I'm not just some guy with a multimeter and a grudge. I'm a certified systems engineer who designs power infrastructure for data centers. Electricity is my love language. So, when my solar inverter started logging phantom drains during off-peak hours, I noticed. Most folks wouldn't, but I'm not most folks. I live in a quiet neighborhood where people brag about their lawn edges and homemade compost, and I keep to myself, tinkering with my home grid and watching for anomalies. That week, I noticed something weird. Every night between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m., there was a 1.8 kilowatt-hours dip that didn't match any of my devices. It wasn't HVAC, it wasn't the hot tub, and it wasn't my backup battery cycling. It was something external. That's when I started suspecting the leech next door, Karen. You know the type, impossibly expensive sunglasses, a voice that carries like a foghorn, and zero understanding of personal boundaries. She'd moved in 2 years ago after a messy divorce, and since then, it had been a parade of poor decisions, wine-drunk brunches, and HOA violations that mysteriously never got enforced. Her favorite pastime was making up new neighborhood rules and citing the HOA like it was the Constitution. She once yelled at a 10-year-old for riding his bike too close to her hydrangeas. But lately, her obsession was this souped-up electric ATV for her teenage son. It was loud, obnoxious, and worst of all, it ran on electricity. I first noticed the cord while trimming hedges, an orange extension cable slinking like a snake over the back fence. It looked like it came from her side and disappeared behind my tool shed. I blinked. That's impossible, I thought. I didn't have any outdoor outlets back there. Unless, no way she'd be that bold. That night, I turned off all my exterior breakers except one, just to see. The next morning, there it was, a dip in the logs at exactly 2:12 a.m. I walked out, followed the fence line, and sure enough, the cord was gone, retracted, hidden. But not before I got pictures. I decided to confront her gently. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe her son plugged it in without realizing it was mine. I walked over the next day and rang her bell. She answered wearing yoga pants, sunglasses, and holding a mimosa like she was the queen of brunch. I mentioned the power drain and asked if by any chance someone in her household had used my outlet. She blinked, smiled, and said, "Oh, that? Yeah, we figured it was no biggie. Just a little charge while we wait for our garage panel to get fixed. You've got solar, right? You barely notice it." I barely notice it. That's not how electricity works. And also, not how permission works. I tried to explain that it was theft, however small, and that it affected my system balancing. Her response? She literally patted my arm and said, "Relax. You're such a tech guy. It's not like we're draining your car battery or something." I left before I said something I'd regret, but my mind was already working. I called the HOA and reported the theft. They said they'd look into it. 3 days later, I got a warning letter for creating hostile neighbor dynamics and unauthorized modifications to shared structures. Apparently, Karen claimed I had installed dangerous traps along the fence and was threatening her family with electric shock. I was stunned, but I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I'm not a confrontational guy, but if you plug yourself into my grid without asking and lie about it, oh, now you've entered my domain. Karen didn't know what she triggered. She thought I was just a quiet guy with solar panels. She didn't know I design fail-safe systems that power military-grade servers. She didn't know I'd once built a self-contained backup grid for a hospital using nothing but spare parts and caffeine. And she definitely didn't know I was about to turn her little midnight joyride into a very expensive fireworks show. I began sketching out the plan that night. I designed a decoy outlet, Something she couldn't resist. Wired to a perfectly legal, perfectly safe, but utterly devastating surprise. Something that would leave her charger in ruins without endangering a soul. It had to be subtle. It had to be invisible. And it had to be personal because she hadn't just stolen power. She'd insulted my craft. I installed the fake outlet on my side of the fence, angled just enough to look forgotten, like I'd lazily left it wired to a tool shed junction. I made sure it looked tempting, unguarded, live, easy, but it wasn't. The outlet was connected to a carefully tuned impedance circuit that would fry any charger drawing more than 3 amps. No house appliance would trip it, but an ATV charger? Oh, absolutely. I set the trap. I watched and I waited. 3 nights later, the cord was back, coiled and plugged in. I watched from my workshop, sipping tea, at 2:17 a.m. The log spiked just as I'd planned. The circuit did its job. There was a bright blue flash, a loud pop, and then the crown jewel, Karen's shriek.